Welcome to Seizing Valor, where we discover God's path for manhood, one conversation at a time. I'm Zack.
I'm Joe.
And I'm Josh. I'm
And
back,
we're
baby.
together
And
again
Happy New Year.
Happy
for
New
the
Year.
first time since last year. We are together again.
Yeah. How about that? It's good.
Well, we actually have a topic recommendation for the first time. So,
Yeah.
so thank you, Emily, for sending in your suggestion. No last name,
Mhm.
because we believe in respecting privacy here. So yeah, our topic for today is how to suffer well. So not just suffering, but how to suffer well. So yeah, we'll be
And shout out
covering
to you,
that.
Emily. We really appreciate the email. Joe had sent it to us and let us know that you had emailed us. So when I read it, I thought it was very heartfelt and it meant a lot. So thank you for doing that. It was very affirming. Yeah, exactly. So thank you so much for listening and for sending that email. It really meant a lot.
Yeah, and it's good to hear that that women who are listening are getting something out of this too.
But suffering and suffering well, suffering happens all across the map as far as your age is concerned. And it's very important to rely on Him, rely on God during these moments. So what does it mean to suffer well?
Or more like what are some tips and strategies to suffer well?
Yeah.
I guess. I guess one thing, I guess, just to maybe I wouldn't call it controversial, but kind of maybe more of a shocking thing to say, just to start us off, is one thing how to suffer well is don't run from it. Don't run from the suffering. Like, don't try to get away from it necessarily. Like, I guess it's not that I don't know, not saying like, okay, yeah, if you're sick, don't take medicine or like stuff like that, but kind of almost talking like what we were talking about before about some of these numbing mechanisms. If there is a day that's absolutely terrible and you're suffering really bad, that's like I wouldn't say don't go for that. Like, if that helps take some of the edge off, but don't always try to run from the suffering, and just kind of like sit in it a little bit, for a few reasons. One, because in our suffering we become closer to God. Two, the suffering can help redeem other people. And three, I lost my train of thought. Crap. There was two. And crap. Well, anyway, there's two. There's two for you. We'll come back when I think of the other one.
Yeah, and I think acceptance of suffering is like a really important thing to just do in your life. Like I feel like when we're young, when we're kids, middle school and high school, we experience some suffering, but it's nothing that's like adulthood, like the kind of suffering that we experience as adults. So oftentimes we kind of just live in this transitional phase in between, like, minor suffering of childhood difficulties and transitions and all that stuff to like bigger suffering, like that we experience when we're older. And so we kind of like don't. I just love my train of thought too. What's going on?
Oh no!
But like, so we live in
strong.
that stage, and it's like we don't really truly accept it, or when it does happening, we like don't necessarily understand how to cope with it, especially if it's like a major suffering event, like someone passes or someone's sick, or like all the stuff that we experience. You lost a job, you have family situations, stresses of marriage, children, life, jobs, whatever, and all of that. Like, if you try to run from that, like, it's not going to go away. And so you just have to realize, you have to look at the scenario, you have to accept it and name it, and like in that way it's like no longer has that power over you, right? So you kind of accept something like, okay, this is going to happen. Life is suffering in some facets, and so I have to accept this, and then from there it's a little bit easier to give it away. Like, I'm going to claim this is something that's a part of life, part of my life, and now I can give it away. It's like, as opposed to running from something, like say like you're a hunter and you're like, something gets up on you, some kind of animal, and you like run away from it, when you can just like try to trap it and accept it, and then you can do with it what you want, But if you're running away from it, you have no control over it.
So Zack is a fan of Pints of Aquinas, as he was saying in the previous episode, and I actually took a little bit from Pints of Aquinas, their blog, but there's a difference.
Josh is also a big fan of Pints of Aquinas.
I'm a huge fan.
There's two different types of suffering. We got good and bad, of course. Good means, in the midst of our suffering, we trust God. We offer, our pain. We communicate that to him as an act of, surrender and love. And then the bad suffering in turn means, we let it consume us. We let it destroy our faith and destroy our hope. And, we just, bathe in that despair. So that's like the real form of running. I gathered.
Yeah.
We could run to him or run away, basically.
Yeah. I mean, that's I think I might have said this on one of the previous podcasts, but that's like I made like a commentary on stress. Like, this idea is the difference between like eustress and distress is like whether or not you consider the stress to be a threat or a challenge. So like you react anxiously if you think stress is a challenge or not a challenge, is a threat. Whereas if you see it as a challenge, then you kind of like have that like more of that performance like anxiety, or not performance anxiety, like the eustress, like the good, like the nerves, like in sports, like when it makes you perform at it. Yeah. So it's the fight or flight type of thing. So I feel like this is what you guys are talking about. So like suffering can be that too, of like how you respond to it is gonna determine your how you feel about it, or like how your experience is going to be. The spiritual writer Jacques Philippe, when it comes to like interior freedom, he talks about how there are three responses to any sort of situation, and we'll mark it as suffering for right now. So one is, as we're saying, you can like rage against it, you can rebel against it, you can deny it. The second is that you can accept it begrudgingly, or the third one is you can accept it freely, like you can accept it completely willingly. And the third is the only path to true freedom. The only path to true freedom interior true freedom is acceptance. Because like if you rage against it, as you guys have been saying, it's like literally it's the same thing that we're all saying, it's just different ways. It's like the running away from it, the denying it, and like it's not going away, like it's just still going to be there. Accepting it begrudgingly, you're just causing yourself more turmoil through like you're still resisting. It's like you're half resisting. And then but if like you accept it completely and freely, you might not be free of the suffering, but you're at least free from the internal turmoil that it might cause you to. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. Definitely.
And
that's like, I think that's like the initial stage. Like that's the first step. Like I feel like whenever you're learning to suffer well, it's like learning what is your initial response to suffering.
Sit in it. Yeah.
So that's good.
So acceptance.
So then what do we do next? Like after we've accepted it, we've freely understood that this is a part of life. This is a situation that we're in, and I'm not going to drag my feet. I'm going to look at it. And I'm going to claim it. So then what do we do with it?
I think the biggest thing is to search for meaning in it, and it doesn't necessarily mean like I am suffering because this happened. Like purpose. That's probably a better word. Purpose in your suffering. So this idea is the one thing that Jesus Christ did that was so revolutionary in the world of faith is that he gave purpose to suffering. Like suffering had no purpose before Jesus Christ. Like suffering was meaningless, was pointless, was just a bad thing. But Christ made suffering redemptive because he suffered in order to save us. So it's like, how can you find that redemption, or how can you find that purpose in your suffering? So speaking of Pints with Aquinas, while I was at Focus, I went to a talk by Matt Fradd's wife, Cameron Fradd, and she talked about suffering with grace. And so this is very apropos. And apparently she has like a lot of health problems, like she is suffering daily for a lot of various reasons, some known, some unknown. And like sometimes it's just a chore for her to get out of bed in the morning. And she's had actually a few brushes with death, apparently. So, but the idea is I guess the whole point I wanted to get from her talk, like the summary, that if I had to get one thing out of her talk, it was one of the first things she said, is that she's come to realize that it's not necessarily holiness that makes saints, it's suffering makes saints. It's like the path to, like, it's not saying that you shouldn't be holy, but like, a path to holiness is through suffering. Like if you think of every single saint in the Catholic Church, every single one of them suffered in some way.
Yeah.
And that suffering is something we are all going to encounter. But it's meant to be redemptive for us. I mean, it can be redemptive towards others as well, offer it up and things, but it's meant to be like our final refining or something like that. Like this idea is that God actually gives suffering to those he favors, because like it refines them, it makes them better, it makes them holy, and it brings them closer to him. Because when you're at your lowest moments too, when you're stripped of everything and you're at your low points, like that's when you can find yourself closest to God, if you let yourself, like that's where you find your point at the point of greatest surrender. So I don't know, it was just really interesting to think about that. And that
I think there's something really, really beautiful about that, recognizing that, it's allowed by him. We do suffer, which we can't escape from, because of the fact that he loves us. And, pain is what is going to help us grow closer to him.
Not in like a masochistic way.
No. But if we trust him in the process and say, thy will be done, it's the only way back to peace.
Yeah.
It's like almost like this idea is that God is all calling us, like he says, pick up your cross and follow me. And if we follow along the path to Christ, the path to Christ is suffering and dying for something. It doesn't necessarily always need to be like physically like martyrdom, but like, like dying for something, like suffering and dying for something. So, and it's really hard to accept, I think, for some people, but there is a level of that, like if you aren't suffering, like if you will live a completely comfy and cushy life, not only are you robbing yourself of your own potential because like you're not growing like at all, but two, it's like kind of a sign that like God doesn't trust you to suffer, like God's not letting you suffer because he thinks you can't handle it, like type of thing, or he like doesn't want to refine you at all. Not that I think that's actually the thought process, because everybody goes through something. It's just how we respond to it. But that's kind of what makes the saints, is like, what did they do with the suffering that ended up coming their way eventually? And so I think that's what makes or breaks, I think, us in this Christian life. It's just, what do we do when suffering eventually does come our way? Because it always will. Like, what do we do with it? Do we respond like Christ did? Or, as we kind of said, like we're circling back to the same point again. Like, or do we run away from it?
I think when that does happen, and easier said than done, we remember that this is not our home, and what's coming is infinitely greater.
Yeah, definitely. And I think one of the traps that sometimes we can kind of fall into is apathy. I think oftentimes when we experience a lot of suffering and we don't respond well to it, it can lead to numbness and the sense of like, just come what may, and I don't even care. Like, just that sense of like, I'm just done with the world.
Yeah.
I've experienced pain, I've experienced suffering, and it's like, look at what's happening to me. I'm hurt, and then now it's like, I don't even care anymore. And I think about that oftentimes with like young people, because I feel like they get bombarded with suffering because of their smartphones and the devices and the things that they get exposed to from such an early age these days. That, like, by the time, like, and I've experienced this in working as a youth minister, like a lot of the high schoolers, it would be like, they become numb to suffering because they've seen it so much, they've been exposed to it so much. It's just like, I don't even care about this anymore. Like, how many times can I see someone was shot or someone was whatever on the news or whatever it is? It just becomes like, and that's dangerous, because then it's like, and then it like loses its meaning, it loses its purpose, it loses its value, and it just becomes like another thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think people need to understand the difference. There's a difference between just like being numb to suffering and just accepting whatever comes, but in like a very, once again, numb and apathetic way, versus like accepting what may come, but trusting in God. I think the difference is that people who are apathetic, they accept what comes, but they don't move. They just kind of like stay there and just stay in place. Whereas those who accept whatever suffering and trust in God move forward.
Yeah, exactly. Definitely.
So I think that's a good point for What?
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Zach.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, so I think it'll be it's very important for all of us to reflect on that topic too. I think, because I think every one of us is a little bit desensitized to some things, and it's just always to remember like the nature of suffering, and we all go through it, and how it's important for us to respond. And that doesn't mean we should be hurt about every little thing that happens in the world, but I think that, you know, knowing what to do with it when it comes, obviously, is what we're discussing, right? But other than just ignoring it or casting it aside, or whatever it is, you know, which I think sometimes we tend to do.
Yeah. And I think there's like a real importance, at least that I've found, like in a lot of the suffering. I mean, all three of us have described how we've had like a heck of a year last year.
Yeah.
But one of the things I came to, and like one of the things I want to have like going forward this year, is this idea of like keep moving forward. Like keep moving forward. Don't let, like, it doesn't mean that like you don't, you know, and that doesn't mean like constant activity. What I mean is like the metaphysical, like keep moving forward. Like suffering may come, but like don't let suffering stop you from like living, or from having a relationship with God, or from having a relationship with others. Like don't let suffering stop you when it doesn't have to. Like if like, yeah, because just because things aren't perfect, or you don't feel amazing, or like you're, you know, you might be in pain, or like, or one of these other things, but that doesn't have to stop you if you don't let it. So like this idea is you can still move forward while accepting suffering. You don't have to stop and wait for it to go away, which I think a lot of us fall into that trap. We were just talking about that apathy comes from like stopping and waiting for it to go away
instead of us moving.
Yeah, moving forward, and just because that's Christ didn't say pick up your cross, wait for it to go away, and then follow me. He said pick up your cross and then follow me. Like, so you can either carry your cross, or you can sit with your cross.
Who in the Bible that other than Jesus suffered immensely would be Job. I think what we should remember about Job's story is that we learn that the world, even now still, the world has always been like in a fallen state, like a state of calamity and chaos, which is inevitable. You know, one thing that I love about Job's story is that in his struggle, we understand the problem of his suffering. Him personally, he was, you know, unwavering in his commitment towards God. But then when he loses everything, his wealth, his health, and his children, you know, for some of us, you know, that suffering, it really hits close to home. And the point of this, Job claimed that God had fallen asleep in his in his participation in his life, and because of that neglect, he had to endure all this unjust suffering. He thought, the lesson that I get of that is that suffering does come, and it's inevitable, but at the same time, even though that's allowed, like we still trust in him, and like nothing is going to magically cure our suffering. The cross that we carry, Jesus carried a cross that was heavier than any that we could bear. So if we rest on that and that assurance, we can handle the cross too.
Yeah, exactly.
But we have to remember that Christ carries the cross with us, though, too.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But one thing that I love that I just reminded of from the end of Job, like the last chapter, the last two chapters of Job is like, it's the end of the story, right? And like all you know, Job lost everything, and then he's like turning to God. So there's a song by this band named Ghost Ship, and what they did is they basically took like the last two chapters of Job and like turned it into a song, and it's called Where Were You? And like it's a really cool song. I'm just gonna read some of the lyrics if that's okay.
Please
go for it.
Okay, so the very first beginning is like Job talking. He said, I said, God, I do not understand this world. Everything is dying and broken. Why do I see nothing but suffering? God, I'm asking, could this be your plan? Sin has taken hold of this whole land. Will you not say anything else to me? It's like pleading, like, God, what is going on here? Like, why is this happening? And then this line is directly from Job, this whole last part of the song. And it's that line. So God said, "Where were you the day that I measured, sunk the banks, and stretched the line over all the earth, and carved out its cornerstone? Where were you the day that I spoke, and told the sun to split the night open, calmed the morning dawn with its light to show? Who shut in the ocean with stone doors, marked the reach of tides on those new shores, hung the day the waves rose and first broke forth? Can you hunt the prey for your lions? Can you use the cords of Orion? Is this whole world bending beneath your will?" And it's like all these things, and he just like talks about it. And on the end of Job, it's like God is just saying, like, have you seen me? Like, have you seen what I did? Have you seen what I created? Like, look at me. You see my majesty. You see my glory. You see this, and you're gonna ask me about suffering. Like I'm here. I love you. I created everything that you see, all the beauty in the world, all the goodness, all the things that are working out and unfolding. Like, look at it. Look at it.
Mm.
And then like that's the response. And then the last verse is like Job responding. "I spoke of things I did not understand. There's things too wonderful for me. Although I had no right to ask, my God knelt and answered me." And it's like,
Mm.
it's got chills. It's so beautiful. I love that.
Yeah. And that is very beautiful. And I think it kind of harkens back to like a little bit what Joe said earlier. This idea is that suffering is also a reminder we're not meant to be here like forever. We're meant for bigger things. We're meant for greater things. This is not the place where we will be free from suffering. Like I don't know. Suffering reminds us that we should want to go home, like eventually, and not stay here forever. We should stay here as long as God wills that we stay here, but like in the end, that this is not. And it's kind of like what like God talks like in this idea is we don't know. Like, I mean, that's one of the things we don't know. Like, like the infinite majesty of heaven that's beyond even the majesty of the earth. Like, and we don't know how all that plan works out. Like in the end, and it's so. Yeah, I don't know.
All right, so let's talk practical things. What's like some practical stuff that we can do when we respond to suffering? So we experience suffering, but what can we do in a practical sense?
So I think one of the biggest ones is that you should share your suffering with other people. Not share make them suffer with you, but like the idea of talk to other people about your suffering, about like what you're going
and it's
through.
not
Don't
it's
bottle it up.
If you might think of it, if somebody's like commenting, don't think of it as complaining. Think of it as sharing of not necessarily a testimony, maybe a testimony, but like sharing the suffering. There's a fine line between that and complaining, so you're good.
Yeah. And I also want to say, like, as much as suffering, we talked about, like, suffering brings you close to God, because when you're at your lowest points, it's when we can draw close to God. Like, these things can draw us close to other people, too. Yeah. Like, until I admitted, like, I had anxiety or that, like, I had problems with porn in the past, like, I got so much closer to a bunch of other people because I found people who also struggled with it. And, like, we were able to be more open, like, with you guys. I was able to open up about a lot of stuff. And I had a lot of other friends who've had anxiety that like I felt closer to them. Like denying that suffering and not talking about it made me feel isolated, but expressing it made me feel united with other people. So it's like a good coming out of.
And I kind of argue that like that's what friendship is like like you're friends with someone when you can be vulnerable with them.
Yes,
you know what I mean. Like that's where the friendship is. Like that's when it starts.
Yeah. And like the most
it's so
vulnerable
important.
things.
And it really is. It really is. Like that's what the devil wants, is he wants you to be isolated so he can steal you. Because as soon as you're isolated, like
yours,
it's empty. It's death, man. So that's why we have to go outwards. Yeah, we have to open up to people who we love, who we can trust, and who will receive us and reciprocate. So I think that's a great practical way to do this. And if you don't have somebody, try to find somebody. Do spiritual direction. Get therapy. Call us. I love this type of thing. Like I love when people open their hearts with me. So like I'll do it. I don't care. Call me. But but I think the obvious practical thing is like prayer, right? That's the big aspect of this. Like when suffering happens, pray.
Amen.
Give it to the Lord. Give it to the Lord.
Yeah.
Another thing
it's kind of like a similar thing. It's like when suffering happens, tell someone else. When suffering happens, tell God. Like, tell God, like, because God, like, yes, he knows, but he loves it when you tell him things, like, instead of assuming that he knows, I guess. Like, that's like that God loves that. And the fact is, like, it'll draw you closer to God too in the same way, because God can relate to your suffering because he suffered the worst possible way that any human ever has or ever will. So if you think God can't relate to your suffering, then you are dead
You are wrong.
Right.
Yeah.
And he's there with you. Like he's crying with you. Like he's feeling that with you. You know, and he wants you to rest in his arms, you know. And so you just gotta do that. You gotta make it happen, which is hard. It's hard to do. But you know, we gotta do it. We gotta do it.
What else you got? Did you got something else, Joe?
I do. You should, but if anybody's listening to this right now, you probably know what your spiritual gifts are. You know the talents that God has given you. So spend time in the things and be thankful in the things that God has, you know, graced you with, the things, the gifts that he has given you. Spend time in that, and that would hopefully reinvigorate, you know, for one, your sense of purpose, and also your thankfulness in what God has provided.
Yeah, I think gratitude. Like, I think that's a good thing. Like, keep a gratitude journal if you're listening. So count the things that good things God has done in your life, rather than focusing on the bad ones.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
And then read that book by Father Jacques Philippe.
Yeah. Interior
Is that
freedom.
one what's the Searching for and Maintaining Peace? That's a really good one too.
Yeah. It's like anyone listening, like Jacques Philippe, they're like really small books too. So they're like really easy to read. Like, it's like cover to cover, maybe it's like less, it's definitely less than 100 pages. I'm not even sure if it's 80 pages, but like
It's like 70
each one
something, probably.
is so packed with little nuggets of good stuff. Yeah, and also read that little book that God himself wrote. Read scripture, you know, it can help. It never hurts. Listen to God's voice. There's lots of things about suffering in the Bible. A lot of, Joe said, a lot of the great people in the Bible suffered. So, yeah. So that's, I think I had something else that was related to what Joe was saying. Now
It'll come to you at like 2:30.
Gifts and talents, doing things that the Lord gave you.
Thankful.
Gratitude.
Oh, no, maybe it wasn't related, but maybe I was just thinking about it. I know all you Catholic listeners out there, you're probably going to roll your eyes when I say this, but offer up the suffering as a prayer, you know, offer it up. You know, I know it's like not everyone. And I wouldn't say that's not like the first thing you should hear, or necessarily always the first thing you should do, because I know that that's like, it's just like a phrase that a lot of people throw around. Just like, sometimes they're serious, but sometimes it's not. A lot of Catholic people sound like they're just saying like toughen up, you know, offer it up. You know, it's like get tough, get good. What the heck? But literally, I mean, like suffering has spiritual power. Like, and the idea is like you can offer up your suffering for the souls in purgatory, if anything else, but like also other people around you, or just giving it to God in general. It's just like, I offer this to you, to whoever needs it most. Like, whoever needs this, like, deliver it. And that's, I guess, like also circle, like, speaking of purgatory, I mean, for those of you who are listening that are Catholic, I mean, this idea is that even, remember, like, so the idea in purgatory, you're going to get to heaven, but you're going to have to suffer in purgatory in order to get to heaven. So like, it's almost like whatever suffering you didn't do on earth, and whatever suffering you avoided, you're going to have to do it anyway. So keep that in mind also when you're suffering, is that more suffering now might mean less suffering later. Maybe that's not a lot of consolation, but yeah, that's, I don't know. This idea is that there's a level of perspective in terms of like, you might be, suffering is getting you closer to heaven in a lot of ways. So.
And I haven't spoken to you guys in like almost a month. It's crazy.
I know.
Pretty much.
It's almost a month. That's nuts. Time's flying by.
Crazy.
I don't know about for you guys, but for me, it's flying by.
As Jerry Seinfeld would say,
people snap out of that Christmas spirit like it was a drunken stupor.
I'm just more impressed that we're already like almost 10 days into January, into this new year. It's crazy.
It's crazy. It is crazy. Definitely.
I know.
What is the most fun month of the year, you think, and the least fun month of the year?
March is the least fun.
Yeah, because it's super
100%.
100%. It's always Lent.
Every year. And there's like, even when we were younger, because there's no breaks in March, it's like just a lame time.
I feel like in college, at least there was spring break though during March. That wasn't
was that March or was it April?
Spring break was always March, but
Was
like
March?
Easter break would always fluctuate depending
Oh,
on
that's
when
right.
Easter
That's
was.
right. Obviously, yeah.
So that would be sometimes be in April, but I don't remember
Yeah.
if they made it so that it was a certain amount of weeks before Easter or it was always the same week every year. I don't remember, but
Mm.
yeah, I don't know. For me, at least, it depends on the time of my life that we're talking about. Because definitely a lot of the time, you're right. Like, I think March is very dismal. But when I was like coaching, for example, November was really rough. October and November, because it was just the longest stretch without a break in college, and the kids were all stressed out, and like it's crunch time on like recruiting. And, like it was a very hard month then. Happiest, I don't know. I mean, I think a lot of people would say December, but maybe like May or June would be up there too, because it's when it starts getting warm. And
Yeah, I would
go
say
outside.
this December or June. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So
My happiest would probably be November because that's what kicks off the holidays. But the least fun would probably be January.
screw you,
January.
man. That's when my birthday is.
Not because of you. That's the light that is January.
The light at the beginning of January.
Because there's just no holiday. There is no feel. It's just the cold, dead heart of winter,
There's Martin
which
Luther
is
King
which
Day.
isn't even winter right now, which is kind of a nice
Mm.
breath of fresh air. This is the winter that never was.
I mean, I like January just for like the new experience of the new year.
Okay.
Because it's exciting for like half of the month, you know. It's like, oh, like new things, new year, here we go.
I like it just because it was the month I was born in, so I feel like I have to like it.
Yeah, it's me with June. Well, and you, Joe, with November, so yeah, it makes sense.
There we go. So when you're born, who would have thought?
Yep.
So
Cool.
like the opposite of the 6 months after. So your half birthday is the worst, I guess. No, maybe not. But July is pretty insufferably hot, I will say though. Depending on where
You
I think
don't
August
like
is
you don't
bad.
like sweating in your bed. You don't like that?
No. When I lived in an apartment without air conditioning, that was literally the worst. Like laying awake at night, just being like,
You guys both
man,
hate the
I
hot.
am just
Right, Josh?
so moist right now. Just
Yeah,
so
I
hot,
hate
sweating
the heat.
everywhere.
Yeah. I know,
But-
like right now, like even during the winter, we use the AC, but we don't use the air conditioner. We just use the fan
Yeah.
on the AC. And so I like to keep my room at like a brisk like 55.
Ew.
But you can always bundle up though. That's the thing. You can always bundle up.
Exactly, because
You
it's so
can't- you
not.
can
This
only
is
take
the
off
thing.
so
I
much.
can't sleep when I have a like wet nose. And for the most part, when I am sleeping, I do have a wet nose.
Have a wet
What,
nose.
are you a dog?
Yeah, you need.
No.
Yeah, you have to like.
My nose is always cold. Maybe not always wet, but it's just always cold.
You mean running? Like, does it run when you're cold?
Like
you
a
mean?
runny nose?
Probably.
Well, that's the whole thing. So, it's a science. There's something about like 65 degrees that like it's good for you to sleep in 65 degrees because your body gets cool enough to the point where like you can like start to do the sleep thing that your body does. I read about this sometime.
Do that sleep thing.
And so for me, I calculated since I'm almost twice the size of an average person. So then I put it down 10 degrees.
That math checks out. Checks out. Somebody call a scientist.
Yeah, get a sleep professor, whatever, on the phone.
Comes in, it's like, yes, Josh's calculations are actually quite correct.
Like a calculator, like
Little chart.
Yeah. Look here,
We laser pointer. You
Check
see
these
right there
numbers and
the threshold for temperature sleeping. So Josh, why don't you tell us where you think?
Tell me about the week. Tell us about the week. Was there any
The month,
suffering?
the
well?
year, all of it.
Yes, I mean, I'll just quickly. 'Cause I've been gone for a little while, so Christmas was great. Kiddos were great. I had the in-laws over Christmas morning early, so they watched the kids open up the presents, and I made cinnamon rolls, which were very good. And so we had
Love me some
breakfast.
cinnamon rolls.
Yeah, amazing. And then we left. We chilled. Had a good time. New Year's was fun. Did the whole thing there. We had like a bunch of people over, actually, some family, lots of family. It was a little hectic, but it was good. And then just bringing in the new year, and just this past weekend, so a couple days ago, my siblings, my brother and sister, came down, and we went to see Distant Worlds at Carnegie Hall in New York City, which is fun because I live pretty close to New York City. So we took a train down, and we did the whole thing. We got reservations at dinner. We ate at this Japanese Asian fusion place, which I did not choose, but it was still very good. But I had ramen for like real ramen for like the first time ever, and I was like, this is amazing. I really like this.
So much better than the cup, right?
I had an old fashioned, which was beautiful. And then went to Carnegie, did that whole thing, saw a concert. It was fantastic. Called Distant Worlds. There was music from Final Fantasy, the video game series, which I'm a massive fan of. Then came back. The train ride home was atrocious. I was telling these boys before, but it was pretty rough for a couple different reasons. But it's okay. Some ways of suffering, I guess we could talk about that. How to respond to that. But yeah, and then just getting back into it, trying to ease into the new year and into the new resolutions and all that stuff. I feel good. It's like one of the first times that I'm like kind of like slowly moving, because normally I'm like, oh, I gotta just slam it January 1st, just gotta bah! And this year I'm like, I'm gonna just kind of ease into it, I'm gonna ease into it. So it's been good. It's been very good. I had spiritual direction already, which was beautiful, and it really got to some good stuff, which we can talk about. Which might actually come up today in this topic, but it's very good. It's been very good, very good. There's a lot of things going on between, just trying to get a job and all that stuff still. So there's kind of stresses and all that stuff with that. But my wife and I are working through it and having a lot of good discussions and trying to move forward with decisions. And I'm been actively applying, and I called some people today, and there could be some potential things that are happening, which is good.
Nice.
Some decisions that we're gonna have to make, but other than that, it's good. Pretty happy.
Prayers going your way, man.
Yeah, thank you. That's me. That's my last 3 weeks.
Wow, that was like a whirlwind.
I know it's a lot.
I got like whiplash. You gotta catch up here.
Yeah, no, the end of the year is always crazy, and we all feel that. It's always gets so busy between the holidays and everything that it's hard to slow down.
This is the busiest you've ever been. Usually we come see you then.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry about that, but we will. We'll meet soon.
So those listening, there will be another episode in the future where we're all in the same place.
Maybe in March.
Maybe in March.
We're
The worst month of the year.
We'll slowly become the best one.
There you go.
We'll have our own spring break. So
That's very good. All right, gents, how was your week?
Joe, what about
or
you,
just
man?
a few days, I guess, probably, right?
That was my few days.
How was your 48 hours, Joe?
Well, what I failed to mention, actually, Zach, is that I had a killer, awesome Friday. I did not have work that day.
That from me?
Well, I just knew that Josh was going to come on to this call, and I decided to spread the good news. I probably had one of the best days in a long, long time. Just things to do. I was with a few people from church at different points. I was with a couple named Ann and Dennis. They kindly brought me to a diner, and we had some breakfast together and talked for like 2 hours, which I have a very good relationship with the two of them. One of them I was in the Freedom group with, Dennis, a shout out to you. Yeah, they're just an awesome retired couple. It was great to just pick their brain, and vice versa. Then I went out again at lunchtime with one of my pastors that we work youth with, and I filmed the news for church that day, which I've become a regular at. We got some Chinese, which was tremendous. Pretty much get the same thing each time just because it's awesome. I just love General Tso's. Anyway.
So then, like 90% of people who get Chinese food.
Yeah, that's all that anyone ever gets.
As I was traveling to my parents, they gave me a call like, "Can you order pizza?" So that's a third meal out.
Whoa, baby.
which was pretty good. I only had like 2 pieces, so it was just I didn't want to eat more. So that was nice.
It's like my dream, by the way, having Chinese and pizza the same day.
Putting the Chinese on the pizza.
Oh, Chinese pizza.
I would say that the best meal was actually the breakfast sandwich. It was like free shavakadu.
Free shavakadu. Free shavakadu.
Fresh avocado. The egg and the cheese and the hot sauce and the brioche bread. It's just so good.
Joe, your day is giving me heartburn just listening to it.
But what else did I do? I had to run some stuff for youth. We went to go visit our new building for our new church, for our current church down the road from us. It was a great, fun, awesome time with people from my church, just hanging out and just basking in the glory of God, just like celebrating, because we'll be moving in there in late spring. It's going to be great.
So I meant to ask this while you were talking about Dennis, but did you ever make the joke like name's Dennis? You know, from the SpongeBob movie?
Name's Dennis. I've been hired to exterminate you.
Yeah.
I don't think he's ever seen SpongeBob. He's retired.
It's okay. You don't need to. People don't need to know for you to make the joke.
Yeah, I was gonna say his name's Dennis, so he probably doesn't know SpongeBob.
He would probably know like the Dennis joke from Monty Python.
Well, I can't just call you man. You could say Dennis.
Hey, Zack.
So actually, the last 48 hours were, I guess, kind of eventful for me, mostly because today was actually almost like the start of my new year. I mean, I had everything like from the new year, but like as I told Joe, I was at Seek all the first week of the year, which was like an experience in of itself. It was almost kind of like it was separate from last year and this year. It was just kind of its own little experience, which was awesome. I won't like rehash the whole thing, but Seek was awesome. But today I started 2 things that are going to be incorporating into my new year. The first, I started Father Mike Schmidt's Catechism in a year. I'm behind because I waited till the 9th day of the year to start, but I just didn't have time the first 8 days. So I'm doing like 2 a day until I catch up. But the Catechism in a year. What?
Claire and I are doing that.
Oh, did you get the special Catechism from Ascension?
I think is it what color is it?
It's white.
Oh no. We did buy one, but we have like it's like a blue one.
So this is like the really fancy like one from Ascension Press, which nice. I love this, but actually as I was just eating dinner, I'm like, oh man, this is gonna get dirty real fast.
Yeah, the white,
like,
yeah. That's
it looks
dangerous.
Fantastic, but it's not gonna stay that way.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just, I mean, definitely I'm excited about it. Because like scripture, I mean, like a lot of people know, I mean, the Bible in here was good because I got to learn a lot of things about the Bible I didn't know, even though I read the Bible, read a lot of the Bible already. But then even with the Catechism, it's like, I have definitely not read the Catechism. I know a lot of things in the Catechism just from being a person of faith, but like, it would be nice to, essentially as a Catholic to know everything that has to do with our faith and have it kind of explained by, a priest. And
yeah, I love the Catechism. I love it so much. Like there's the wealth of knowledge in that, like everything you would ever possibly need to know, and like how to respond to things, and how to just believe and have faith, and like it's amazing. Like
yeah, it's literally like our God. So between Scripture and this book, like as a Catholic, like you have everything you need essentially.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's good so far, and I mean I love Father Mike, and I feel like the Scripture one was kind of hard only because I feel like I wasn't also in the right place to be really receptive of it. But now I feel like I'm in a better place. So I think I'm ready for this one.
And I feel like, this one is going to be a lot shorter too.
Yeah. Because
I feel like some of those days you get like really long readings and they'd be hard to do that.
Yeah. Which is good. So I'm excited. And the other thing I started today is I started Exodus 90. So some people who are listening may or may not have heard of it if you're a person of faith, but it's essentially like it's for men, and it's essentially about I can't ever say this word. Aestheticism, prayer, and fraternity. Most people think of the aestheticism part, but yeah. So it's just this program that you do for 90 days. I know you guys have done it already, so I'm not. I know you don't need me to explain it to you, but I'm explaining it to everyone who's listening.
Yeah.
So essentially, there's like those 3 cornerstones that I just said, and there's like different requirements like you're expected to do for 90 days. So like for prayer, you're supposed to do a holy hour every single day, and then you're also supposed to do like an examen at night. For like the fraternity portion, you're supposed to do it as part of a group. You're supposed to have an anchor, so like a one person that you communicate with daily about your experience, and then you're also supposed to be part of a fraternity, so like a group that you meet with weekly. And then like the big part is then like the asceticism. So there's a lot of things you give up, essentially. So stuff like
a lot of things.
A lot of things.
So
you have to give up all dessert and like sugary drinks, coffee, alcohol. You have to give up snacking between meals, which is definitely a tough one for me.
Mm-hmm.
1,000 was pretty high. So
did they do a shower one too?
The cold shower. You have to take cold showers.
No technology.
No, like, yeah, so no unnecessary use of tech. You can use it for like work or if you have to communicate with someone, but you're not allowed to use your phone to like just scroll or use the internet. You're not allowed to do television or like watching sports or any of that stuff. There's a bunch of other ones, but like it's intense. But I've already have like a lot of thoughts about it already. Like, well, first of all, I heard about it. I kind of knew sort of about it until before I went to Seek, but then when I was at Seek, I went to a talk that was sponsored by Exodus 90, and I learned more about it. And I'm like, and normally I would not have been a person that was like, yeah, heck yeah, let's do it. But I think God was really calling me to do it because that whole day and even the day after that was a lot about like popping out at me about asceticism. We were doing things about like the rich young man in some of our missionary disciple training about like the idea of being not necessarily having to give everything up, but being able to do it if asked. Or like, yeah, having that disposition to be able to be detached or to give things up. And just like the idea of how much am I giving versus how much am I getting? Like how much am I consuming and intaking versus how much am I producing and giving? There was just such a lot of things that were like coming at me where I'm like, okay, I have to do this. And even looking at the list, I'm like, oh boy, I'm not sure if I can give that up. And that was like a light bulb in my head. I'm like, that probably means you should. Because if you are wondering if you can or can't, that means that might be a problem. So you should probably do it, even if it's going to be hard. Not that I feel like I have like a serious like addiction problem with anything, even though definitely some stuff I feel like I have a relationship I wish to
just attachment
improve. Yeah, to like detach and to like make the relationship with the thing more healthy. Like stuff like being on my phone too much or like what was the other big one? Like sweets, like it's definitely a thing, or that even the television. Like there's a lot of stuff I feel like I need to not give up forever, but learn how to detach from, and so I can
cut back.
Yeah, and know how to have a healthier relationship. And at first, it's like, oh yeah, it's proving that I can do it. But then I kind of had a revelation today. It's like that's not what it's about. It's about me giving it all to God and trust and like proving that I'm trusting Him.
Yeah, so
but it's crazy.
So Zach, I did it the past 3 years, and kind of my experience with it was like, I found, all that you're saying to be true. Like it's definitely good. It's important for us to men to detach from things and to give things to the Lord and to lean into others. It's kind of like a reset, But I think what I found was there's like 2 issues that I found with it. It was like one where it became almost like the asceticism became like an idol in a sense. It's like I'm trying to do this, and like if I don't do it, then it's horrible. I'm like a loser and a failure if I and then all that stuff. But then like even more so, I don't know. It just felt kind of idolatry to me after doing it for 3 years in a row.
Yeah.
And then I also found that like when I was having a fraternity, that like us as guys and the group that I was with, that just weren't really honest with each other. And we weren't like deep enough to like, because I feel like if we did it, it would be very fruitful. But like the groups that I've done it with, it's just like every day or every week or so, we would text each other and be like, "How's everyone doing?" And we just be like, "Oh, that's good." Like, that's fine, it's fine. And then, but meanwhile, I'm like, I'm struggling here and here and here and here, and this is hard. I don't like this, and can someone encourage me? And then like nothing,
Yeah,
but,
I'm sorry, man. That sucks.
Yeah, so it just kind of took the wind out of my sails for it. But yeah, and I obviously I think it's great. It's a good thing. I think men should definitely do it. But I found for me, like I didn't really get much out of it. It just made me really unhappy, and I felt really isolated. And even so with my bride, like there'd be so many times where she would be like, "Can we watch something?" And I'd be like, "I don't know if we should. I don't think we can because I'm doing this thing and you're not." So like but it was like a weird dynamic.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but that's like I'm happy that you're doing it and you should do it, and I'm going to encourage you, and I want definitely do it. And I'll support you if you need support.
Yeah.
But for me, it was like, I'm not going to do it again.
Yeah. Which is totally fine. And I'm not even sure if I'll do it more than once or anything. I just know I think God wants me to do it at least this time.
It's time now. It's a chapter for you.
Yeah. And I was going to ask, like, and I know you guys have done it already, so to have you guys for encouragement would be fantastic.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily really have like a full fraternity at this point. I have like another person that I'm doing it with, sort of. And so like one or two people that I'm going to be like kind of as anchors, but like, I don't know. I'm just trying to get a group of people that I'm close with and I know that are men that like maybe aren't necessarily doing it with me, but like will encourage me through it, and like I'll be able to talk to them about it.
Yeah. We can discuss it on here.
Yeah.
If you want to text us if you need encouragement,
sounds good.
I'd be more than happy to support you.
Thanks, guys. So all you men listening, I mean, this is something I guess to consider, but Josh brings up a good point. Like, depending on where you are at in life, like definitely one of the things they say is like, if you're married, you really have to like think about and discern this and talk about it with your wife, because it is like, I'm single. I don't really have a whole lot of obligations. Like, it's really mostly just me. So I'm in a place in life it's not easier necessarily for me to overcome these things, but it's not as many ramifications for people around me. So I think that so anybody listening, take this really into account. I guess the one thing, just one of the things I thought about, like, as I was thinking about this, because this is like, Exodus, and it's like, the Israelites coming out of Egypt and stuff, and like the idea of going through a desert. And one of the things that's really hard about a desert is not necessarily even that it's just hot and brutal, but there's nowhere to hide from any of the brutality. Like, there's no place to find refuge. There's no shade. And a lot of the times these things that, they're asking us to give up, we use as shade, or like a hiding place, essentially. And so it's like, what happens now, like when you don't have somewhere to hide, like, that's, exposes you to difficult times, but it also lets God see you better, type of thing. So, but yeah. And so it's day one. And obviously, everyone listening, I'm a little bit chipper now, but it's only been one day. I'm sure 2 weeks in, it's going to suck, because that's the way things happen with me most times. So stay tuned for that episode. And I come storming and be like, this is crap and this sucks. So
yeah, you're going to find yourself being really bored, I think.
Yeah, that's one of the other things, is like, I want to try to find other ways to like fill my time. Which, like, there's a lot.
All I did was read. I just read books. That's like all I did for like 3 months, which is good. I enjoyed doing that, but it just felt like I wasn't really doing too much.
Yeah,
but I mean, that's the idea, right? Like,
you're
supposed to, your attention is not on God as opposed to devices and whatever.
Yeah, and like one of the things too is like I write a lot. Except I haven't been writing a lot recently because a lot of these other things have been getting in the way, and I'm like, okay, well, let's put these things aside so that there's no excuses now, and see what happens. And
so what we would all like you to do right now is please subscribe to Seizing Valor on YouTube. If you have the compulsion, please like this video and comment on this video too. It's very important because it helps us out in the algorithm. Also, follow us on Spotify and on Instagram. You guys can see extra content on Instagram. It's basically the exact same thing on Spotify, but we would love to have you on there because it's portable. You can hear us on the car if you have Apple CarPlay or whatever the Android version is. Anywho, if you feel compelled, or just Bluetooth, yes, another great alternative. Anyway, also you can check us out on our email. If you feel the compulsion to negatively talk about us, or you want to keep your comments or questions private, you can email us at seizingvalor@gmail.com. Everything is in the description of this video / we also have it linked in our Instagram as well. And with that, let us close in prayer.
Before we pray, have either of you guys seen Space Jam 2?
No.
No. I refuse.
No, because when you said algorithm, it reminds me there's a character in Space Jam 2 whose name is Al G Rhythm, because he's a computer program. His name.
Josh, you ever lame sound effects? I've never heard of that before.
No, I don't.
I miss old times.
You guys should watch Space Jam 2. It's a great advertisement for every other Warner Brothers movie that ever was made.
There you go. All right, guys, let's pray it out. Name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, amen. Heavenly Father, thank you for today. Thank you for the gifts that you've given us, the blessings in our lives, the friends and families that we get to spend our time with, the gifts. And I just pray that you be with us in this moment, in this time. Let us remember what suffering means and the purpose of suffering, and how you suffered so that we ultimately don't have to go through that same death. And I just pray that you give us the courage and the understanding and the eyes to see and the faith to know how to handle suffering, and when we suffer, what to do with it. Now it's so important for us to open up, to give it to you. Give us the courage to be able to do that, understand that vulnerability is okay, especially for us as men. Sometimes we need to get that funk out. And ultimately just to turn to you, to give it to you, as you know your plan for us and for the suffering. And so always give us the eyes to see when suffering arises. Thank you, Lord. We love you. Most precious and holy name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you all for attending. We will see you all next time.
Bye-bye.